So this next video is going to be all about hooks. What kind of hooks do you need? What kind of hooks are available? And what is the best thing for you as a beginner? So I thought it'd be easiest to kind of start with the different types of hooks. So there are plastic hooks. This is a plastic hook. This is another plastic hook. This is for really big yarn. And then there are wooden hooks. This is just like a bamboo hook. And then my personal favorite are metal hooks. There is one other hook type. It's called Tunisian crochet hook. It's basically like a long string and it has a crochet hook attached to the bottom. I'm not really going to get into this. This is like a whole other subset of crochet. If you're interested in learning how to Tunisian crochet, my recommendation is, her name is Tony, and I believe her YouTube is TL Yarn Crafts. She does some Tunisian crochet videos, and they're very informative, and she's amazing. So different types of hooks are used for different types of things. A plastic hook can be really reliable for just your simple acrylic yarn. Really, this is kind of a universal hook. It's not my preference to use. If you are crocheting a lot, you can end up having your hook will start to squeak because acrylic is really, it's plastic. And so it'll start to squeak over time and it'll squeak. And that's why I kind of don't prefer this. The squeaking really annoys me. So I don't prefer plastic. And then wood, I have it, I never use it. It's made more for slippery yarns. An example would be chenille yarn. You can use this with to get a little bit better of a grip. Any yarn that has any sort of silk in it, this would be a great option. Or any like velvet yarn that also tends to be kind of slippery. And so wood is really great for that. Kind of the universal is metal. I think metal works the best. It just, I don't know, it slides off. It's really easily. I don't make my stitches too tight on it. It's just really great. And not to say, I'm not saying that like plastic is the only thing that makes yarn squeak. Sometimes this will squeak too if you've been crocheting for a long time. And I actually saw a hack that if your yarn is squeaking, that you can just rub it on your nose, just like this. I like to just literally rub it all over my nose. And the oil from your nose will kind of prevent it from squeaking. It's like, you know, WD-40 on hand. So I do that all the time. If I start to notice that my yarn is squeaking, I will just like rub my face with it and then I will get back to crocheting. Kind of silly, but it's a useful hack. So with crochet hooks, ergonomics is very important, and ergonomics just refers to the comfort of something in your hand, how it conforms to your hand, and how comfortable you feel using it. My personal preference is to have hooks that have like this kind of like rubber base on them, kind of like this. Once you get to much larger hooks, like even this one, I think this one is not even labeled. It's probably a P or something sized hook. It's just plastic. There's no bottom to it. And there's hooks like this that don't necessarily have a bottom, but they have kind of a shape that makes it comfortable to hold in your hand. And those are things you're going to want to consider, especially if you're crocheting something like a blanket that can take, you know, hours upon hours. You want something that's comfortable to hold in your hand. Now I could do a hack video later on. Some people put like eraser grips on crochet hooks if they don't have kind of like a rubberized base, because a lot of metal hooks are just all plain made out of metal. I've seen people who have maybe some arthritis. They've put an entire tennis ball on the shaft of the hook and they've kind of used that to crochet with. So if you are having some hand issues, there are kind of things that you can do to try to make it more comfortable to hold if you're going to be crocheting for long periods of times. And there's also, you can get like copper infused gloves. They are kind of like compression gloves for your hands. They leave your fingertips free, but it just kind of compresses your hand. And I have heard from other people that that can kind of help if you're having some pain while crocheting. Understanding hook size is very important, and you will need to have a specific hook size for every single project you do. There is not one crochet hook fits all. I definitely have my own favorite sizes, but yeah, there are many different sizes of crochet hooks. Obviously, this hook is not going to complete the same project that this hook completes, so it's important to kind of know the differences between the sizes. So I will throw up a little conversion chart right here. So there are typically two ways that you can identify a hook. There's either going to be a letter on it, or there's either going to be a number on it. I typically like to go by the number because, as you can see from this chart right here, a G hook can stand for 4.5 millimeter, and it can also stand for 4 millimeter. Typically and there's also not a letter associated with 4.5, and sometimes it just says 7, which is a little frustrating. So that's why I always like to go by millimeters. I think it's just a little bit more reliable in that case, especially because for years I didn't know that 7 meant 4.5. I thought I didn't know what it meant, and it was very confusing that they have all these letters and then in the middle there's a number in there. It doesn't make sense to me, so I always like to go by the millimeter standard. I think it's just very straightforward, more straightforward than the lettering system. Okay, so let's say your grandma gave you some crochet hooks. Again, based on the chart right here, you should be able to see that, like, this is one of my favorite hooks. It's called a clover hook. As you can see, the letter is right here, and then the number is right there, and then the brand's on the end. That's typically how you should be able to identify a crochet hook. They do make these tools that you can kind of measure the crochet hook. If you have a crochet hook that's unlabeled, that you have for maybe a brother, a friend, a grandmother, or whatever, I don't necessarily recommend using that. I'm not sure about how sizing has changed over the decades, but ultimately, if you can't figure it out, crochet hooks are pretty inexpensive, and so my recommendation would be for you to just go out and probably buy one that's already labeled. Okay, and now to my recommendations. So if you are beginning to crochet, there's kind of a couple of things that I recommend. My first recommendation, and I don't have these here because I decided a while ago that when I was going to really get into crocheting that I was going to buy a nice set of hooks. And I had a huge collection of hooks, and I sold them on Mercari a long time ago, actually. And I just decided that I was going to keep what I thought was a good tool. And so, but my recommendation, if you're looking for a cheap, just run-of-the-mill, something you can find at any craft store, would be Susan Bates. They have complete metal hooks. I don't necessarily recommend those because I think those can kind of make your hands a little bit sore, but specifically the Susan Bates that have the black base, the black like rubberized handle, I think those are the most comfortable. That is also what is called an inline hook. It can kind of help you make cleaner stitches, and I'll show you the difference between an inline hook and a regular hook. This is an inline hook. You can see right there that this throat area is a little bit thinner, and it's almost a little bit sharper, versus here's another hook that's not considered inline. You can kind of tell the difference. This gold one just kind of has some softer edges. But inline is a great hook to get started on. I really enjoyed Susan Bates for a really long time. They're pretty inexpensive. I think you can get them for $2 to $3 at Joann's. And if you don't have that in your area, I know, like, I live in Ohio, so we have Meijer as a grocery store. There's this brand called Boye, B-O-Y-E, and I'll throw up a picture of some of the crochet hooks here. These typically only have a metal base, but they are pretty easy to work with and great for beginners as well. And like I said, fairly inexpensive and really accessible. Okay, but I've decided that I really like crochet and I want to get really involved and invested into it. And what are the best hooks that I can buy? I think nearly every single crochet artist that you ask what type of hook they use and what they recommend, they're all going to say the same thing. It's clover or more. You can find these at Joann's, I believe. And the whole set, I'm not really sure I recommend the whole set, because the whole set, I don't think I've ever even bought it before. I buy my crochet hooks individually, which is not as cost effective, but I found that the clover set, which I'll put up a picture of it right here, some of these sizes get to be really small and I never use them. The smallest hook I have is a 2.25. I bought it for a specific project and I've not picked it up since. So having some of these hooks that have, or having some of these sets that have the smaller sizes in them is not super beneficial to me. And so I don't necessarily prefer it. If you're looking for something that comes in a nice little pre-packaged set, and I do have a clover hook shoved in here, so I'll take it out. It's this tulip set. I got this off of Amazon. Any tulip set is just amazing, and they're beautiful crochet hooks. This is very similar to the clover. I will say, like, the base and maybe ergonomics of it is maybe just slightly different. You can see that the clover is just a little bit bigger. and the needles are just ever so different, ever so slightly different, and these are different sizes, so that could be by 2 here. Here are 2 of the same. So here's a 6 in tulip and a 6 in clover. You can kind of see the difference. They are really similar. I think the throat on the clover is maybe a little bit deeper, but for the most part, they are basically identical, and I feel like you get the same results out of both of them. But yeah, tulip or clover are, in my opinion, if you're going to keep crocheting, these are the ones that you need to get. I will say with clover, you can almost always get a 40% off at Joann's, so don't ever pay full price for the clover set. You can usually always find it on sale. Now with that being said, if you're working with chunkier yarn, sometimes blanket yarn as people like to call it, you're gonna need probably a bigger hook than a 6. And once you get out of a size 6 in clover, they start to come in plastic, which these are okay for that. I don't mind that whatsoever. But just so you know, like, there are no metal versions of this to my knowledge. Maybe there is. If there is, let me know. Where can I find it? But plastic typically works great for those bigger sizes anyway. So these are another great option if you are working with a thicker blanket. So the last thing I will say is that if you are a beginner crocheter and you're like, I just need a really basic set of, you know, just a few crochet hooks that you think that I might use, you know, when I'm starting crochet. So again, if you don't want to buy the whole clover set, this is another option. The most common use sizes that you are going to use, I'll put them up. It's going to be a 4.5, a 5, a 5.5, and a 6. So it's going to be these 4 hooks. Those are the most common beginner sizes that you're going to use. So that is my recommendation. If you're going to buy, you know, a small set of hooks, a small little collection, these are the recommendations of hook sizes that you should buy. If you have these, honestly, you'll be set. I rarely ever reach for other hooks unless I'm working with a blanket yarn, which tends to be a little bit bulkier and thicker. And also, you don't have to buy everything at once. You know, if you have wait until you have a project that has that size. Because, you know, I did not buy this initially. I waited until I had a project and I was like, man, I need a big hook. That's what I bought this for. So just wait and watch your collection grow. And like I said, I don't even own everything that I started with. If I did, it would seriously cover my entire desk. But yeah, those are my recommendations. And if you have any crochet hooks that you love below that I did not mention, sound off below. And I'm looking forward to just continuing this series and learning with you. So if you have any suggestions, comments, send them down below, and subscribe and follow for the next video.